Welcome to the Book Bungalow's virtual author event with Zarrar Saeed, author of Pureland. And I did not get my copy of the book in time. Do you happen to have a copy yourself, Zarrar? Oh, you're muted.
Not yet. I think we just got stocked, and all the retailers are going to start getting their copies. So I'll get mine in another couple of days. Yeah.
Okay. So I can't show you the cover, but I think you've seen it in the flyer.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. So do you have the cover or no?
I have I put it in the flyer.
Oh, okay.
That
right.
I sent to them all. So.
Okay.
My name's Tanya Mills. I'm the owner and manager of the Book Bungalow in St. George, Utah. Southern Utah's only independent bookstore, offering all new books and a full range of events, but we're virtual for now on the events. Zarrar's book's available for order from our store's website. I've put that link in the chat room, and I've also put a link to his Facebook page because do you have a website?
I operate through Instagram, so you can find me there.
All right, look for him on Instagram too. I don't have that link off the top of my head. Anyway, we'll be sure to include both those links in the description when we post this recording to YouTube over the weekend. And those of you who've registered will get the YouTube link as soon as the video posts. In his debut novel, Pureland, an assassin is the narrator of the story, and he begins his testimony explaining his motives by claiming responsibility for the murder of the fictional Nobel Prize winning physicist Saleem Agha. Inspired by Pakistan's only Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Abdus Salam, a real person. The assassin tells Saleem's story and talks about the tragic relationship Saleem had with his beloved nation, Pureland. Full of fascinating mysticism and magical realism, the novel deals with prejudice, politics, and love, among other things. Zarrar Saeed, who's joining us from his home in New York, where he lives with his son, was born in Lahore, Pakistan, and spent his childhood between that city, Dubai, and the US. While he studied science in college, he obtained a graduate degree in finance. I think it was from George Washington University. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Still, it was his studies in science that led him to discover the man who inspired this, his first novel. We're very pleased to have him with us here today. If you have any questions as we go about this discussion, please put them in the chat box and I'll do my best to convey them to him. So let's talk about first, Zarrar, your point of view character. Oh. Am I admitting you again? Okay. Got you twice. All right. Why did you choose to tell the story of Saleem Agha from the point of view of his killer? And did you plan to do it that way from the beginning? If not, what did you to change?
Yeah, not at all. I think when I started the book, it was just a very general kind of, third person point of view story. And I finished the first draft and it just wasn't working for me, and at the same time, I was also discovering my own voice. And I think when it suddenly came to me that I needed to write it from the point of view of someone who has kind of woken from a slumber of sorts and just discovered that, what he's done is wrong. And I think when the narrator came to me, the voice of the narrator came to me, the entire story became a lot easier to tell, because it gave it a personal point of view rather than, it sounded too preachy without him,
No, exactly. I love this book, by the way. And
Thank you so much.
flows so well. And I think it's because it's told in this guy's voice. And you do such a good job each chapter of reminding us who's telling us this story.
Thank you.
But yet then it goes into the storyline and you kind of almost forget. But it's got a great voice in it.
Thank you.
So the assassin says near the beginning of his tale that, quote, more than anything else, this is a story about love. Can you elaborate on his statement and also tell us why you chose to focus on love in its various forms?
So, just the fundamental theme of the book is love and nostalgia, and nostalgia obviously being a form of love. And I think the quintessential love story has not only to do with the beloved and yourself, but also the place where you fall in love. And I think that was a very important thing for me to bring out in this way. So the story of exile for anyone, living outside of their home, for whatever reason, is always tied to a kind of feeling of loss and love for something that's been left behind. And so I think it is a love story. It's a tragic love story, and I wanted it to be told in that way. And I wanted to kind of set the record straight on the very first page. This is not a murder mystery. This is not a kind of crime fiction novel. It's a story of love and the loss of love.
Great, yeah. Now I know I looked up the word because I was intrigued by your title, Pureland. So I looked up Pakistan because I had a suspicion, and sure enough, it means land of the pure, right?
Yeah, that was completely accidental, to be honest. We had an agent very early on that was telling me, she basically said that, we need to, this can be anywhere. And I think the narrator says in the novel as well that Pureland can be anywhere. And hence I wanted it to be kind of like the original country, but also have, have it applied to anywhere. So the universality of that word can be applied to anything. What is pure? Pure means that something is unpure, something is tainted. And just the idea of purity is such a flawed idea. And I think that can be applied to the current state of affairs. And we kind of see that happening around the world. The idea of purity and supremacy is taking over a lot of people's school of thought. And this kind of was, kind of a warning sign, if you may. So that's what the narrator is trying to tell.
Okay. So my question was if you meant it to be ironic when it's Pureland.
I think it didn't want it to be that way, but it sounds better. It just sounds cool, right? As a title, it just sounded better when I changed it. Given someone's advice, it just sounds good, and it kind of is more relatable throughout. It wouldn't have worked if I had done, a specific place, if I called it Syria or Afghanistan or Iraq or Mesopotamia.
True. But when you describe Lahore, is it mainly a reflection of Lahore?
Yeah, that's the actual pronunciation of the
Is Lahore?
Lahore. Yeah.
Lahore.
And it's a colloquial Punjabi slang term, and a lot of people haven't really brought it out, and I thought I would be the first one to actually write it down and have it in a novel. But that also was part of developing words and names that are catchy, which is very important to me as a writer. I think every single character, if you see in the book, it's not just thrown together. And there's no Joseph Smiths, John J. Jacobsons or anything like that. It's a very thought out. Even the American characters or anyone else's, the naming of the character
Okay, let me
was
jump.
very important to me. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so why Saleem Aga?
The Saleem part was a play on the original name. Um, I wanted to keep it kind of similar to Salam, and uh, the Aga part comes, for not to give too much away, but he's given that name by his landlord, by the person who's his benefactor, and he tells him why he's giving him that name. He gives him a name of prestige so that people wouldn't know where he's from, and he's hiding his identity. And what better way to hide your identity than to tell everyone you're a prince?
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
I'll come back to, I had another, I'll come to it now because I noticed, couldn't help but noticing, um, the landlord in the story is General Khan. I may not be saying that the right way, but he names his two sons, Khalil and Gibran. And
Yeah.
I had my last 2 years of high school in Beirut, so I'm very
Oh,
familiar with
nice.
Khalil Gibran.
Right.
Was it an
Yeah. So he
a
says that
tribute
in the
to
very
him?
beginning. Yeah. Yeah. He says that in the very beginning that he names his sons after his favorite poet. Um, and
Oh,
yeah. So you can see, like, no name is really there. There's reasons behind it, and I think I got that. Just to give you a background about that. So I was watching all these old videos of P.G. Woodhouse, who used to come up with such fantastic names, and it was very important to him that the names made sense. And the more you looked at them, the more the character built out from those names. So it was important for me to the naming of these characters was very essential to their nature and to the narrative itself.
okay. All right. Now, there's a good bit of magical realism and even mysticism in um, in the novel. I wanted to know how big a role mysticism plays in the culture of Pakistan.
Well, I mean, I had this interview this morning. Someone from Memphis was asking me about that and said that it also, they used the word delta, and I didn't know what the delta meant, but stories in the delta are also told in this form. People from South America constantly use this form of, I didn't even know what it was called. I don't know if magical realism is an appropriate word, to be honest. I think it's just the nature of in which we tell stories involves a lot of mysticism and metaphor and irony. And that's just the way South Asians tell stories. South Americans will tell the same way, tell the stories the same way. Gabriel Marquez, did the way these people, and Borges, when they write their stories, they write them in this way because that's just the way we speak. That's just the way we talk in general. When we are telling stories, we bring in mystical, if, for example, a lot of people are very religious, and in religious households, the idea of bringing in the archangel Gabriel and Adam and Eve and Jesus Christ and Muhammad and their stories become part of your story. So when you're kind of giving the metaphor to explain something, we always use these mystical terms. And I thought, I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but what is important to know is magical realism is nothing if you don't have the real element. It makes no sense if you have a character who can just fly out the window. You need to have it rooted in something real, and that's the more important part. If you don't have that, then I think it makes for very lousy writing and even lousier reading.
When you grew up, did your parents tell you stories that showed that, or?
I believe so. I think a lot of our stories that we grew up listening to were stories from around the world. Like, if you even stories that we read as children were extremely fantastical. Like, I grew up reading a lot of Roald Dahl, and
Yeah.
we also heard stories about the from the Arabian Nights, and we heard a lot of stories from um, you know from the South American culture. so we had a very vast knowledge of storytelling, growing up, and just from school and also, the home. And it didn't occur to me that I was doing something. But what actually happened was when I was about 8 years old, uh, my father had a copy of um, the Satanic Verses.
Oh, yeah.
And he had the copy leather bound, and it was Xeroxed, and it was very hidden from, because it was obviously banned, and anyone who had a copy of that book was would have been sent to jail. I grew up in Dubai, and that was it was a very blasphemous thing to have that. But I always found it intriguing, and as a child, I read the first few pages of it, and I was like, this is crazy. It's a crazy story about the angel Gabriel falling from the sky, and I wanted to use that to pay tribute to that writer.
So, Salman Rushdie, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so is that kind of where you got the idea of Saleem's birth, the account of his birth?
No, you'd be surprised, actually. So Saleem's birth, in the real story, the true story of the Salam's life, he is a mute until the age of 3 or 4. And his father, he's born in a village, takes him to a local soothsayer. So in these feudal villages, you have to understand there are no real universities or schools, and obviously there's no hospitals, right? There's no doctors. So everything is governed by soothsayers and saints that give out potions and things of that sort. He was taken to one of those, and he prophesied his life. So I wanted to make it a little more edgy. So I made the saint levitate and things like that, and just to add a little bit more color to the story. And I think in the beginning you remember the narrator saying, when you have nothing, hope is your only, you look forward to these stories, that the promise of hope is the best thing you have. Mm-hmm. And so these villagers hold on to these promises as if they're they're gold, and they hold on to them so long they forget what they're holding on to. And so that's the kind of thing I wanted to portray.
It worked well. Yes. Now his first love is for his homeland. And I love the way you symbolize that with his kiss of the earth when he's born. He lands on the dirt, and but I wondered, do his feelings for his homeland always take precedence over his other loves? His love for General Khan, but more importantly, his love for Layla.
I think Layla becomes the symbol of his love for, or the metaphor for his love for his country. And I think he in real life also loved, his nation very much, but was always, he never went back to it, in a way. He was excommunicated and exiled. When you are in exile in that sort of way, your love, always takes precedent over anything else you have. And, the loss of a home is a very, detrimental loss. It can be very wounding for someone. But overall, I think the idea of love goes back to, the beloved and the place you fall in love with, and the place you fell in love. And for example, the Adam and Eve story that I keep bringing up, mm-hmm. is, now it's all about the utopia where they were born. It's not about them anymore. We all want to go back to that paradise because we've been told about it for so many years. And so that love story has, in my opinion, lost its essential, theme, which was these two guys who fell in love. And now all we hear about is the utopia. So that's the kind of play I wanted to bring into the theme of Saleem and his desire for his beloved and his desire for the place where he fell in love.
You speak about exile in a way that almost, do you feel like an exile yourself, or have you felt, or do you know somebody who has felt?
I do know a lot of people that have been in exile, some very fairly recently. A writer friend of mine has been exiled from his country of birth, from India. And I have also, like, the idea of exile is not always something that is, you don't escape your homeland because you're fleeing war or bloodshed. Sometimes it can be as simple as something like coming to university, or getting a job somewhere. And so that kind of exile is a very subtle one.
Yeah.
It's a self-imposed one. It can end at any time, but it somehow seems to linger on for a very long time. Um, Edward Said called it the sorrow of estrangement, and you are estranged from the place where you belong, or you think you belong. But the idea is that you keep changing that. Right? Your home keeps changing as you grow older, especially for someone like me who's had very, who's had to move around a lot for whatever reason. Um, there's a lot of rootlessness, but the idea of exile is, for me, in this book, in this particular story, the most powerful part of the story, because it drives the narrative forward. Without it, the story doesn't work as well.
Mm-hmm. I've also lived in a lot of different places. I have a hard, when somebody asks me, where are you from? I never know how to answer that. I still don't know how to answer that, because I was born in one country, lived in other countries. Now and then we'd live in the States, then we'd go back overseas. And,
Mm-hmm.
How do you consider yourself from Pakistan?
Yes, definitely. I do. Although I haven't lived there as long as, I've lived in New York City, which is remarkable. But it's still a part of me, because it went with me wherever I moved. Um, I had, yeah, I've had people tell me that they carry their country with them wherever they go, and I found that very fascinating. We bring the luggage of our past with us wherever we go, and we unpackage it and we keep it there, in the form of photographs, or
Yeah,
items that you've brought from somewhere.
that's
So yes,
interesting.
I do consider myself like that, but I think very much, I'm very much a New Yorker. I've been here a very long time. It's it, it's I like, I don't think I'll ever leave this city for a while.
When was the
So
last time you went back to
I
Lahore?
went to I went for the Lahore Literary Festival,
Oh,
um, that took place in 2020, yeah, last year.
whoops.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay. Um, did you take your son with you?
No, unfortunately not. But he does go with me. We visit sometimes, and he likes it there.
Do you have relatives back there?
Yeah, I have a lot of relatives.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I know you said that, were there any other things that were similar between Saleem's childhood and Dr. Abdus Salam's childhood?
The I think if anyone listening or watching, if they get a chance to watch the movie Salam on Netflix, you will see that it's a very moving, tragic tale of someone who loves so much but has to face so much hatred. And there's a lot of similarities that I didn't even know I was making up. So when I started writing the story, it was actually a nonfiction story. But when I started writing it, there was so many instances that I had to use, the liberties of fiction to tell them better. Like, how do
Yeah,
you tell someone?
you said there was
Yeah,
some magical or mystical elements in his life.
yeah. So he
And
actually
so what,
believed in a lot of weird things towards the end of his life. He would have gotten multiple Nobel Prizes if it wasn't for, just blatant racism at the time. He was the only, brown man, and the most every single physicist at the time was a white Caucasian European.
Mm.
And so the idea that he was made out to, not made out to, he actually believed in religion in a very, a mystic religion. He believed that he spoke to God. He believed that God speaks to him through mathematics and science. So it was a very weird thing for me to like watch and read about that, because the realm of science doesn't have any room for these kind of mysticism, mystical beliefs. And here was this guy who's revolutionized the way we use energies today, and he believed in the fact that the celestial being was talking to him. So I had to there was no other way to tell that story other than through fiction.
That's true. Okay. All right. I wanted to talk let's talk about the Amadis. The novel delves a good deal into the different class systems in Pakistan, or in Pureland. Is there a caste system in present-day Pakistan like there is in India? And if so, what are the groups? Are there other groups besides the and maybe talk a little bit about the Amadis?
So the Amadis are, I've met a lot of them. Most of them are in exile in Washington D.C. area and Virginia. Some of some of them are in the UK. Abdul Salam's family are also, in the United Kingdom. They're one of the most persecuted people in the 21st century. That goes without saying. Not only persecuted by people of the country that they originated from, but they were systematically judicially excommunicated, which never really happens. It's almost like they had to. It was almost like they had to carry ID cards that were different from everyone else. They have to declare themselves as heretics. When an Ahmadi goes to get an ID card, he has to declare himself a heretic. The systematic judicial excommunication began with Benazir Bhutto's father, who excommunicated the Ahmadis just because he could, and it hasn't stopped since. So there's legislative laws against Ahmadis calling themselves Muslim, and if they do, they are committing blasphemy. They can go to jail forever, or be hung to death. And there's a lot of anti-Ahmadi rhetoric that is used throughout the country for blaming them for things. Like any other persecuted community, they become villainized for things that they haven't done.
Can you
and it's pretty tragic.
What's the difference between a Sunni Muslim and an Ahmadi?
So the fundamental difference here is that in mainstream Islamic belief, the idea of a Messiah is thought of to be something that will happen or will take place. The Ahmadis believe that the Messiah already arrived. And he arrived and he gave us this message, and now he's dead. And this religion is basically, and again, there's offshoots within the sect. There's other sects and so on and so forth, but that's the core fundamental belief. And what irks the general Muslim population is that they believe that these guys are claiming that Muhammad was not the last prophet, and that is paramount to any Islamic belief, is that no one after Muhammad can have these revelations because he was the only one, which sounds pretty pretty obnoxious.
They can't say he was the only one, because they believe in Abraham and Isaac and some of.
Well, he was the last one, right? So the buck stops with him. So but if you look at it, since his death, I've looked this up because people have asked me this question. There have been thousands upon thousands of people that believe that they're, a messiah of some sort. One of them was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Mhm.
And so there have been multiple people that have started their own, moral reformatory actions. They started their own group, but these guys have been singled out for it. And it's very tragic that their fate is not going to change, because anyone who tries to speak up for them, give them equal rights, suffers the same consequences. I being one of them. I've been sent a lot of threatening messages while I was in Pakistan. I've been given, warnings. There've been a news channel did an interview with me and then took it off. The books had been taken off the shelves for that very reason. So you can see how like fear can make people do things they wouldn't otherwise do.
True. That's true. Um, okay, the other thing I wanted to bring up, it was just fascinating to me because I put this in I self-published a novel, but I have temporal lobe epilepsy. And I was intrigued that you used that, did Dr. Abdul Salam have it? No. So
No.
I figured maybe you decided, like I did, to use that as a device to help make the visions and things a little more credible.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. And I think, thank you for asking that, because I did a lot of research on that. The idea, there's a doctor that described the visions of many people that claim they're messiahs or prophets, bleeding from the ears, the kind of visions of, great illustrative visions of, angels talking to them and things like that. They declared that, the temporal lobe epilepsy does do that to people. And most likely many people, many prophets that claim to be prophets back in the day had this disease. And I thought I'd use it to help the story move along. Like I said before, the magic is nothing without the real. And this part was the real.
It's real, yeah. Okay. I think you referred to Edward Said before. I loved the different quotes that began each chapter. And I love the one by him when he said the achievements of exile are permanently undermined by the loss of something left behind forever. And we've talked about exile.
Yeah.
Let me see if I... So, but I asked you, but you're not, how tied do you feel to Pakistan?
Tied enough, I guess. that
Okay.
I do feel like going there and visiting. I do, I want to keep track of what's happening there. I'm interested in it. Maybe not as much as, time allows me to do so, but I think I do feel a longing for it in a way.
You have this whole overlay in the novel. I mean,
Yeah.
the assassin at the beginning talks about how he's working for the caliphate. The caliphate has taken over what was Pureland.
Yeah.
How do
they
you...
tried.
Yeah.
They tried and they failed
today.
So I felt that way, when I wrote this story, this was 7 years ago when I started writing, or 8 years ago. I felt that at any moment, the entire socioeconomic discourse would collapse on itself with the infiltration of the Taliban which was then forming the ISIS groups. And I thought, what about a doomsday scenario? What would happen if these guys storm the parliament, hoist their flag, send their tanks rolling down the street, what would happen? What would take place? And I thought about the other countries that have witnessed such revolutions, like Iran and Afghanistan, that were once beacons of education and intellect and just overall good times.
Yeah.
And the Persian Empire has collapsed on its head overnight. And so I thought, that'd be a cool story to tell. Luckily, it's not like that anymore. I mean, that was, we've hopefully done away with that fear, but it's always there. It's always lingering on the horizon. Any kind of purity, like I said before, is a very dangerous notion. The idea that you can be culturally monogamous is a flawed idea, and we can see how that can destroy cultures completely.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've talked about, you've mentioned the Satanic Verses and how that kind of influenced you. Did you feel influenced by both his literary style and his personal biography? Because, he had a fatwa issued against Salman Rushdie. Had a fatwa. It's just like in this book.
Yeah. I actually spoke to him about, we keep in touch over email. And I met him when he was here at the Asia Society. We joke around about that, and I sent him my very first review was a comparison to Midnight's Children and his writing, which kind of was a good thing for me, but it put me in a hole. I'm now like people that don't like him automatically don't like me. Yeah, so I think his style was very similar to mine, also because we had very similar upbringings, which I kind of said before. We come from upper middle class, fairly secular Muslim households. I left when I was 17 or 18, and he did the same, and he's been in exile ever since, which he calls which I call exile, or living outside of one's home. And I'm doing the same thing, and we have similar stories to tell because we come from the same place. I think I've lost you.
Oh. Yeah. Where'd you go? Gotcha in that one. Can you still hear me, Zarrar?
I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. We
Okay.
can't see you, but we'll deal with that.
Okay.
There you are. Okay.
There. Okay.
How would you characterize your writing as different from his? Because you're not exactly the same.
I don't know. I think if you could tell me what's different. Like I think I write very different from him. I do. There's a lot of American literature influence, just due to my American educational background. I don't use many words that are not English. I purposely did that.
That's true. Okay. And he writes longer sentences?
Yeah. Some that are pages long, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, what would you say are the main underlying messages of your book? What are the 3 messages you would hope that readers would come away with?
I think yeah, I don't know about three, but I'll just say one. I think it's a work of fiction that should be enjoyed as a work of fiction. It's a universal tale. I think, it's also a very American story, because when, hundreds of years from now, when we look back at these stories of, Junot Diaz and Jhumpa Lahiri, and they're not going to be known as Dominican or Indian or Chinese writers. They're going to be known as American writers, and it's going to weave itself into the fabric of U.S. literature. So I think it's kind of this. The fiction should be enjoyed, because that's what fiction is for.
Yes.
There's no other reason.
So along that line, can the situation of Pureland in the novel be compared to America?
It can be compared to India. It can be compared to America. It can be compared to current day, Brexit and the UK.
Uh-huh.
Like the narrator says, Pureland can be anywhere.
Finally, do you have another book in the works? And if so, can you tell us anything about it?
I mean, I'm very superstitious when it comes to that, but there is another novel that I'm almost, I'm gonna have to say possibly be done with it like by the end of this year. We're just in the editing phase, but it'll be completely different from this. No magical realism.
No? Okay. Does it take place? Can you tell us where it's set?
It's a New York novel. It's a coming of age young adult fiction.
Okay.
That I wanted to experiment with that genre a little bit. So.
Okay. Oh. My viewers, do you have any questions? You want me to unmute you if you have questions, or there's so few? I'm gonna unmute. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Unmute.
Okay.
Hi, Carla.
Yes. So I wanted to thank Zarrar for sharing part of a Saturday afternoon with us, but I'm wondering how important, Zarrar, is it to you to continue sharing the stories and the legends and myths of your homeland with your children?
I think it is the most important thing we can do as a human being, is to continue to tell stories, because we're the only creature on earth that does so. And not only the stories of our homeland, stories from around the world, from everywhere. It is very important that the collective pens of writers create the moral landscape for where we can all breathe. So I think it's very important that all stories should be told, and no story, no matter how bad you think it is, should be silenced. Because once you silence one voice, it's a very slippery slope. So I think we should continue to tell tales and learn from one another, and be open to any kind of story, and try and relate it to yourself.
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else? Marcia?
Without prying, could you tell us a little bit more about your own life? You were Pakistan, and then Dubai, and then New York. As I understand from what you've said, could you fill in the gaps a little bit for us, please?
I don't know if there's many gaps there, but it's my family moved to Dubai when I was young. I grew up there. I moved back to Pakistan for high school, and then went to college in Ohio, and then lived in Washington D.C. for a little bit, where I did my graduate degree, and I've been in New York ever since. So.
What was the difference between school in Dubai and school in Pakistan?
I can't hear you. Sorry, there's a lot of noise in the back.
Here, I'll mute myself. That's our phone.
Okay.
What did you say?
What was the difference between school in Dubai and school in Pakistan?
Oh, that's a whole. I went to a very private, elitist kind of British school in Dubai. I didn't like it at all. It was horrible. Extremely racist teachers.
Uh,
You know, it was a very difficult environment to be in. Pakistan school was great. I've been in. So basically, I went to international schools. You know, my whole life.
mhm.
So the school I went to in Pakistan was also very, uh, for rich kids, but it was the American school in Lahore, and it, in some way, I think the place itself had to do a lot with why I liked it better than Dubai. There was a lot more culture. There's a lot more. It's a city that's more than 1,000 years old, and Dubai wasn't, at the time when I was growing up, was not even 20 years old. So there was a lot of uh, there's something about Dubai that was very plastic. It is still today, but even more so then, because it was trying to build itself in an image that it didn't know where it was going to go, and hence it had given a lot of its business to British companies, and British people would have settled there since the 70s and 80s, and they've been there since.
Mhm.
And they created their legion of schools dedicated to upkeep their sort of anti-Bohemian bourgeois society. Is the best way I can put it.
Yeah. Yeah, I had 5 years.
Horrible place.
I had
Horrible
5
place.
years in Baghdad, and there was a lot
Yeah.
of traces of British colonialism there.
Yeah. And it was a fake colonialism. You see, it wasn't real. And I liked the education part of it, because we had a vast variety of things at our disposal, from music to sports and everything else. But I don't think that sort of schooling system will survive in the next century.
You said that they were racists. Were the teachers
Oh,
all
cool. All the time.
were the teachers all
I
British?
had teacher. Yeah, they were lower middle class British people that came to Dubai and kind of, in a way, to make more money, have more backyard space, but they carried with them the prejudices of their homelands, of Manchester and Liverpool, and these places that were going through their own kind of transformation in English history. And so they brought this prejudice with them to Dubai, and their kids went to school and a lot of the companies were built by British people and had British expats, like Emirates, the airline, and so it was the teachers that kind of perpetuated this prejudice. I'm sure a lot of people didn't feel it that way, but this was early to late 80s, early 90s.
Mhm.
And now things probably have changed, but it's still, the British elite school system is very, very, very different from any other international schooling system.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm excited with at the time you were in Dubai, because that was really the beginning of the country,
Yeah,
of the United
yeah.
Arab Emirates, because it started in the early 70s.
1971 or 70.
Yes, and so this was when Sheikh Zayed, who was really going for, and he was in charge for like 30 years.
Yeah, he died. He died in the early 2000s, I believe. But Dubai itself was run by another sheikh called Sheikh Rashid, who was, I believe, the brother of Zayed, and he was a very progressive guy, and he kind of wanted to have a city of merchants. He wanted to have a city of commerce, and so there's no taxes there. There's a lot of there's a lot of businesses. It promotes starting businesses there and whatnot. So, you know, they did do a good job in building it in that way.
I lived in Abu Dhabi for 3 years and in Dubai for 3 years, working
nice.
at the Zayed University, which had been created for the education of Arab women. So that was
nice.
It was probably a very different time.
Yeah, yeah.
When were
Very
you
different.
there?
I was there from 2001 to 2003 in Abu Dhabi, and then I went back to the Illinois State Library, and then I returned to Dubai, and I was there from 2005 to 2008.
My
Nice.
brother taught architecture at the American University of Sharjah.
Oh, okay, I know that
Yeah.
place well.
So I imagine, Zarrar, have you been to doesn't the Sharjah do a literary festival?
I have not, but I really want to go. I have an uncle who's there, and like he's in the AU Sharjah,
Uh-huh.
and it's all about distribution. Like it's really about, you know, getting books to countries is a very difficult thing, especially these days.
And because of the topic of your book,
Yeah,
will
I
they
don't know,
accept it?
but I think so, because they're so far removed from that prejudice that they won't have any clue what this is all about. You know.
Okay. Well, are there any other questions?
I have a question. I have
Okay.
a question. Hi, Zarrar.
Hi.
Hi. So first of all, amazing. I really learned a lot, and I come from the same cultural background. I really learned a lot today about things I did not know at all. I want to know what inspires you to write, and what do you love most about it?
I think it's a very liberating feeling to be able to create something out of nothing and then have that something tell you what to do. So a lot of the times you know, the characters are the ones that are guiding the narrative along, and they're very powerful characters. And I focused a lot of, especially on the female characters of the book, because in a feudal world of misogyny and hatred, and kind of, there needed to be powerful, you know, female figures. Just the same way, like if you have an angry character, you need a mellow character. When you have a jolly character, you need a sad character. It's kind of plays on each other. So these characters then take on different personas, and they tell you what to do. So then you just, you know, you kind of create the space for them to live, so to speak.
That's true. So I'm assuming that you're not one of these writers who use an outline. You just,
Yeah.
neither do I.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Well, you really should buy his book. And I wish I would get it in already, but you know, even if you order it through our website, I'll have it shipped directly to your home. So anyway, I want to
Thank you so much
for sharing your time and your insight, Zarrar.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Again, I'll be providing the link in a follow-up email to the video recording of this. And we have our own channel on YouTube, so I'm going to share it. I was hoping my brother at least would sign up for this, because he was interested in your book, but maybe he's too busy with, he's still teaching architecture. But anyway, it was a pleasure to talk with you, Zarrar.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Goodbye to you and all our listeners. Was that your wife?
No.
Who was that asked that last question?
Oh, that lady, she was my cousin.
Your cousin, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
From Cabo.
From Kabul. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cabo,
wow.
Cabo, Mexico.
Cabo. I
Oh,
thought you said
okay.
Kabul. Okay. All right. Okay. Well,
All right.
welcome. And we'll see you all hopefully for
All right,
another
thank you so
event
much.
sometime. Goodbye.
Thank you so much.